Alright, hi there people. Today on VHS Crazy, we're going over DragonHeart with Dennis Quaid and Sean Connery. Let's get into the flippin' dragon-fueled action up in here. Am I right? Okay, let's go. Let's do this. Alright.
Hello? Popcorn delivery.
Put a little weekend in your week. Rent a video.
DragonHeart is one of those movies with the really flashy case. Like, if I saw this on the shelf, I'd probably go for it. Obviously, I did go for it, because I have it. The cover here makes it look like it's this breathtaking adventure with this flippin', like, cool-ass, like, rainbow thing on the bottom. You got the knight, you got the dragon, like, holy shit, you know, this is a medieval adventure for the ages. I do take some issues with this movie, despite it being made for literal children, because I'm a film critic, and what I do is nitpick every last detail to an obscene extent. So let's get into what this movie does wrong. First off, there are a lot of anachronisms in this movie. The main character, the heroic knight Bowen, it's pronounced somewhat like that, is dedicated to the old code. However, this movie is set in the 8th or the 9th century, around 876 if I recall correctly. I'm probably wrong on that. And the old code was in place around the 1100s. So first off, our main character is sworn to a system that doesn't exist yet. So, you know, right off the bat, they don't really have much of a grasp on medieval history, which is kind of the most important thing when you're making a medieval film. Even if it's like a fantasy, you at least want to understand, you know, basic chronology. Around the 800s, that's a little early. That's like early Middle Ages. I think in knights and stuff, I usually think like, you know, the 1000s and the 1100s and like that. That was when, like, the Crusades were on and whatnot. You know, I've been called out on my lack of medieval history before, mainly just because the Middle Ages were a period of stagnation, so personally I don't really fault this movie for, you know, trying to say, well, you know, it doesn't really matter what year it's set in, because all medieval periods are the same, which they pretty much are. Nothing much happened during the Middle Ages. Very little progress was made, at least in Europe. A lot of progress was made in China. I get that, and obviously they'll want to make it an older date, so like, dragons are really early on, like before a lot of written history and stuff, so I get that, you know, trying to make it early, so it's like, get the dragons out of the way. So there's that. Probably the biggest flaw in this movie, besides the props that look like they're made out of balsa wood, and the frickin' like the costumes are just the most, like, stereotypical medieval peasant shit I've ever seen. I mean, it looks like something out of flippin' Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but unironically. It looks like they dress these people up not understanding what typical dress was like in the Middle Ages. But that's not really offensive. What's really crazy is that, like, Dennis Quaid does not know how to put on a British accent, and he doesn't even try, and he just speaks the whole movie in an American accent, except in the medieval times, America didn't exist.
I got me one just the other day.
So there was no American accent that Dennis could be going off here. I think that's one of the biggest problems. Even in a, you know, medieval type movie, like for instance, King of Thieves with Kevin Costner, where he plays Robin Hood, where, you know, the main guy's an American actor, he at least tries to pull off a convincing British accent. And, you know, not to say that he does it well or anything, but you should at least try to put a little accent into it. But the problem is that this is a really American movie. Like, a lot of the actors are British, but like, then you got Dennis Quaid. The female lead character is also an American actress, and she also speaks like 100% American. So, I mean, not that anyone has to talk in like Middle English or like the Canterbury Tales or anything, but like when you have this flippin' like knight and he's talking like Han Solo with like this, hey, let that maiden go, man.
Call when you needed me.
It's just really hokey, and it kind of ruins my, it kind of cuts my belief. More than the flippin' dragon. Like, why can't this guy just try to put on a little bit of an accent so I believe he's for medieval times? Like, I get that then, like, all the American children who are watching this wouldn't be able to identify with him because he'd be too snobbish for their liking, but, like, if you're gonna set a movie in medieval times, at least have the characters be medieval, at least have them have a British accent or like a Scottish accent. Like, a character in this has a thick Scottish brogue, and that sounds fine. The accents really do it more than the props or the sets. Some of the sets in this are actually kind of admirable, like for instance the opening sword fight is actually filmed on actual castle ruins. The problem, of course, being that this is supposed to be medieval times, and during medieval times the castle wouldn't be in ruins, it would be a fully operational castle. It's like, why is there a 1,000-year-old castle in the time period during which castles were relatively new? So that doesn't make much sense. I do admire the castle ruins, though. They do look cool, and they add a lot of credibility to the film. But then the castles that are renovated and new-looking don't look as realistic. Now, part of the problem and part of the reason all the sets and props look so fake is obviously that a ton of money went towards developing Sean Connery's dragon character, Draco, who I will admit is pretty adorable, and Sean Connery brings the heat.
How much gold did a tattered carcass put in your purse?
This is maybe his most ridiculous role, next to Zardoz and Sir Billy, but at least he tries, and that's pretty admirable. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people like this movie just for Sean Connery's performance. He's a good voice actor, more than people give him credit for, especially if they've just watched Sir Billy.
My name's William. Billy to my friends.
He actually does have quite a bit of vocal range, and even if he's not on screen physically, his personality definitely comes through this dragon. The problem is that you pour so much money into the dragon that everything else looks abysmally cheap. Again, going back to the Kevin Costner situation, that's a movie that doesn't have dragons or any really fancy shit, so they can spread the budget around evenly to create this believable medieval type setting with opulent costumes, real life palaces. They give the Sheriff of Nottingham all the regalia and everything. And this takes Robin Hood, who's mostly a fantasy character, and really elevates him and makes it think like, dang, Robin Hood could have been real. He could have been based on a real person. Because, Kevin Costner's Robin Hood is just that good. Seriously, watch Kevin Costner's Robin Hood if you haven't seen it. It's really good. The main problem is that Draco is CGI, and there are very few movies I give a CGI pass to. Last review, I said Twister had pretty good CGI. I do stand by that. I don't think it's that hard to animate a clump of wind. It will look fake, but it's not that hard. There are only a few other movies I give the CGI pass to. I give it to Jurassic Park, mainly just because the sets and stuff and location shooting in Jurassic Park is so good that it kind of makes up for the CGI. Also because, they have a lot of practical effects in that and, cool stuff that, you really just forget the dinosaurs are CGI, and that's fine. The other movie I'd say I probably give the CGI pass to is Starship Troopers, just because, the CGI looks fake as hell, but whatever. It's a fun movie. I guess I gotta give Starship Troopers a pass. The effects don't look that great, and it would have been way cooler if the bug aliens were practical, but, Good movie. I can't dunk on it. It's an okay movie.
Maybe you are.
And this is mainly the movies I give a CGI pass to if the story is just that good. If the story is so good that it excuses the use of CGI. Because either you have a really lame story and practical effects to bolster it up and make it a masterpiece, like Manos the Hands of Fate or something, or you have a really, good story like Jurassic Park, and the CGI is just kind of an afterthought. You could easily do dinosaurs practically. The main difference between Sean Connery's character Draco, Drake, certified lover boy, is the main difference between Draco and the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park is that the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are they don't have names and they don't talk and they're not really characters so much as they are wild animals. So they can be CGI and you don't really care because they're just dinosaurs. They're not like characters. The problem comes because Draco is like a fully sentient and he just talks like a person and acts like a person the whole time, and there's basically nothing that distinguishes him from a person. So he's basically just an animated cartoon character. And that's really a problem when you're building this persona around what is essentially a computer rendering. It does not look convincing.
Hello.
One of the quotes on the back here says, "Sean Connery isn't just the voice of the dragon, he's its heart and soul." Yes, that's true. Unfortunately, he's not its visual appearance. One of the most appealing creatures since E.T., says Michael Medved at Sneak Previews. The main difference here, I think, is that Draco is CGI and E.T. is practical. And that's one of the things that makes E.T. fun and likable. And, you can really latch on to him because he's a real puppet. He's a real alien right there. He's a little alien guy. And Draco is a giant CGI computer rendered weirdo, and he's not E.T. This is one of these are just the facts. Practical creatures, especially ones with tangible personalities, are better when they're like puppets. Troll is good proof of this, not Troll 2, but Troll 1, the original. Tons of puppet work in that thing, and it all looks amazing. You also have Gremlins. Gremlins is a good example of a creature movie with characters who are done practically and look way better than if they were done in CGI, because CGI just does not look good for facial movement or speech. I like Sean Connery. He's a nice James Bond, and I like him in Hunt for Red October, which, by the way, I'm going to do a VHS review of soon. Even Zardoz, fun movie, but he really, he clearly had fun voicing this dragon, which is nice and all, but the dragon does not look that good. Now, I'm sure when it came out, and CGI was all new, it had only been a few years since Jurassic Park, and this movie is trying to capitalize off the success of Jurassic Park, because of course it was, because Jurassic Park was the highest grossing movie thus far, and everyone wanted a slice of that sweet, sweet Jurassic Park pie. Sure, when this came out, people thought, oh my gosh, this CGI is amazing. But in hindsight, it looks like a Nickelodeon show.
Welcome to Dragon Talk.
And they could have done better with a practical dragon. Would have looked better, would have been more convincing, and overall, would have cost less so you can spend more money on the fight scenes and shit. The movie opens up with Bowen and Prince Einon battling it out on, like I said, the castle ruins with wooden swords, which obviously is just supposed to be training. They're not using real swords because, they're just training. The problems arise when the fight scenes that use metal swords later on look just as fake and just as play acted and the swords are clearly made out of plastic and not metal. Like, they rent real horses and stuff, but, you know, all the weapons and shields look so fake. It looks so tacked together, and I just wonder, like, you know, maybe they should have spent less on renting horses and more on just, like, the swords, because they look really bad. There's one point where, like, it's so obvious that these rocks are, like, CGI'd in, and it's revealed that the rocks are actually Draco, but there's some rocks that are clearly CGI'd in. Also, they repeat the same animation twice in the movie's runtime. It's very obvious they just reuse the same animation of Draco's tail waggling beneath this waterfall as he goes behind it. And they also just happen to end up at the same waterfall twice. I guess they just had this one set, which is really sad, you know. I mean, this thing had such a... It spent so much money on its main centerpiece. Ooh, here's Draco, that, like, everything else looks like a frickin' set. It's not convincing at all. It practically looks as authentic as Robin Hood Men in Tights, for gosh sakes. Probably the biggest problem with this movie is that the fight choreography is really lame, which is a big problem, especially if your entire movie is leading up to a climactic battle scene, and you can't even choreograph a fight really, and none of your, you know, actors are that good at fighting. It has one of the fakest looking battles I've ever seen. Also, because this is PG-13, you can't shed any blood. Prince Ionin, or however you pronounce his name, is literally shot in the heart with a flipping arrow, and he just pulls it out. There's no viscera, he's not leaking any. Like, I get it's a fantasy, and his heart is fused with DragonHeart or whatever, but he'd leak a little onto his shirt. There'd be just a little drippage. I mean, his heart has just been flipping punctured. But he just pulls it on out, and there's no blood. Like, a little blood would have made it so much more believable. But it's PG-13, because the only people this movie's can appeal to are, like, very young kids who just love dragons and fantasy and princesses and shit. So none of the fights are, like, none of them are believable. There's this whole bit where Bowen, like, pretends to shoot Draco because he's just, like, faking it, and he's swindling all these village people out of their money. And Draco will just, like, catch the arrow and fall into the water. But that's how just all the fight scenes look. It looks like everyone is just faking it and having the swords, like, stabbed behind them, and it does not look convincing. And, like, come on, no one's getting stabbed, no one's getting hurt, there's no blood. The Middle Ages were so bloody. There was so much gore and violence and viscera. Where is this? No blood. You know, people die, but there's no blood, obviously, because that'd be too graphic. We gotta tone it down for the youngins a little bit. The fact that there's no blood in any of the fight scenes, and just the really, like, even if there's not blood, really bad fight choreography. The battle between, like, the prince and the knight's army, it just looks so contrived. Like, none of these people were directed at all. They just clash into one another and they start swinging shit around, and it just looks so sad, you know. Like, this movie could have been potentially good. It's riding off the coattails of Jurassic Park. I mean, Draco is a fun character, I'll give him that, and Dennis Quaid's performance is pretty good for what it's worth, despite his like, completely unbelievable American accent. It's okay, you know. I mean, the other characters are fine. Some of them are actually English, which lends a bit of credibility to this. Again, I get it's about dragons, but, like, at least have your characters talk like the country they're from. Otherwise, it's just really, really hokey. And again, like, this movie expects us to be really impressed by all the CGIs and all the flippin' effects on Draco. But, you know, like, to say it's as good as Jurassic Park or as good as E.T., that's a stretch. To say that Draco is as memorable a character, like one of the most appealing creatures since E.T., that is a stretch. E.T. is really frickin' appealing. He's a well-designed character, and, you know, Draco he just really isn't.
Or you can listen to my alternative.
It says, Rob Cohen's heroic adventure blazes with fantasy, humor, and the most amazing special effects since Jurassic Park. And this description is just not really worth reading. It's 1 hour and 43 minutes, and that's really all I can say about it. The movie is preceded by a commercial for Hercules: The Legendary Journeys starring Kevin Sorbo, which looks like it'd be a lot more fun to watch, just because of what cheesy trash that show is. And also that Kevin Sorbo is now a fundamentalist Christian, and, endorsing Greek mythology is tantamount to heresy in his line of work. I think that's pretty funny.
Hercules faces the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
But DragonHeart itself is, it's a formative fantasy film. I will say that. It's not Lord of the Rings. It's not, like I said, Kevin Costner, Robin Hood. There's a lot of good fantasy movies from the 90s and medieval type movies, like I said. Braveheart's a good example. Really good. One of Mel Gibson's best movies. He's in some bad ones, but Braveheart's okay. Braveheart's pretty good. I will say that, for what's worth, DragonHeart, which, has a very similar title to Braveheart, so don't get confused. Don't buy this thinking it's Braveheart, it's DragonHeart, and it's different. But, Sean Connery gives us all. I can't say I hate on Sean Connery. His unique way of speaking is pretty. It really does lend itself to this old curmudgeon dragon. So if you're like, if you have a toddler, pop this on. They'll get a kick out of it. They'll like the dragon antics. Obviously medieval stuff has not lost its appeal. Everyone loves a good fantasy, which is why, like, that Green Knight movie is coming out now. Who doesn't like a good solid medieval adventure with some fantasy sprinkled in there and whatnot? But just overall, I think this movie does not live up to quite the hype it gives itself, despite being, created by Industrial Light and Magic and everything. Draco just does not have the same kind of charm or flair that other characters by ILM do, and I can see why this movie's kind of forgotten. It's a cult classic, and for a good reason. It's fun, but it's not Jurassic Park, and I think movies that just try to bank off the success of Jurassic Park will always, not be as good. Obviously, kids are more into dinosaurs than dragons these days. Dinosaurs are real, obviously, and that adds a lot to the appeal, like the thought that dinosaurs actually walked the earth at one point and dragons never did, so, like, who really cares? But for what it's worth, this movie is like the ultimate dragon movie, so if you're into dragons, then this is the movie for you, I guess. The tagline is, "You will believe," and I can't say I do believe after this, because again, Draco is basically just a cartoon character, but it's nice that this movie thinks I'll believe. Even if I don't, it's nice that this movie has faith in its production value and special effects. It's not often you see this level of confidence in a movie, so I have to give it that.
Come on, Dragon.
The screenplay was written by two guys who are very, clearly very interested in writing medieval type stories and fantasy settings, so I gotta say I commend them for that, trying to bring their passion project to life, trying to bring their story to the big screen, even if it's not the best product imaginable. It's decent, it's competent. So what do I give DragonHeart at the end of the day? I give DragonHeart, and I know some people are going to get on my back for this, but I give DragonHeart 4 stars. I know I've said a lot of bad things in this review about DragonHeart, but it's not a good enough movie to give 5 stars. You wouldn't watch this out of choice, but like, again, if you're at a family party or something and there's a bunch of 10-year-olds yapping around, you pop this in, we'll watch it. And, you know, I mean, I can't say you couldn't watch this as an adult and not at least find something to enjoy about it. It's a pretty fun, it's pretty fun. So I'll give it 4. I know I've said a lot of bad things about it, but the good ultimately outweighs the bad. And then sometimes in these reviews I just focus on the stuff I don't like, and obviously the stuff I do like is also in here. Just to save time, I focus more on the stuff I don't like, which is always more interesting, of course, because I think it's a lot more interesting to learn from a movie by its mistakes than by its virtues. I've always said that. So, 4 stars for DragonHeart, a weird dragon movie from 1996, 1 hour and 43 minutes. It's a decently lengthed movie, and Dennis Quaid is, for all intents and purposes, pretty good. Even if he is an American in medieval Britain, he feels like a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court the whole time, but at least he tries. Also, they visit Avalon, you know, King Arthur's like resting place, this magical island at one point, and it's just like five like pillars and like a stone courtyard. So that's kind of underwhelming to think that that's all Avalon is, but I guess, you know, whatever. So yeah, that's DragonHeart for you. If you enjoyed this review and you're looking forward to more, then write to Nicholas Cicada, 1424 Columbine Street, number 1, Denver, Colorado 80206, because that's how I keep these reviews pumping out. That's how I stay motivated. That's how I make the sweet, sweet American fiat currency. And I got some fresh content on the way, so check it out. And until next time, sayonara, suckers!